energy. Sugar energy.
Yeah, did you have a good time though?
Yeah.
Did you enjoy it?
It was
Ready, guys? Here we go.
definitely a time warp.
Questions you never thought you could have. 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 In church.
Church. Hey, welcome everybody. Welcome, Andrew.
Hello.
Andrew literally just walked in the door. He's still taking his coat off. He is opening the MacBook full of questions.
Yes.
And
I love how you always reveal the behind the curtain. Like, 99.9% of people are listening and have no clue, but you're going to put it out there. You're
We
going
could
to
just
spoil it.
carry on.
I'm going to
Not talk about it.
I want video. I'm going to paint you a mental picture of what's going on here.
I thought he just wanted to enter like an all-star wrestler with the theme music, come in.
It
That's
kind of worked
true.
that way.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I like commenting on clothes and what people are wearing and whatnot. So Dave's got this is like a burnt orange with a
Let's go with it.
with a black
I think
collar
I think
today,
it's
and Andrew
burnt
looks
orange.
like. You ever seen the movie Kicking and Screaming with Will Ferrell?
I just tried to watch that. Couldn't make it through it.
Oh, it's great. It's a
No.
great movie.
No, it's
Andrew
not.
has zero sense of humor, so that's probably why he doesn't like it. But yet he's wearing the same outfit that Will Ferrell wears in that outfit with the blue and black tiger outfit.
Yes, it's true.
You look like a blue Tony the Tiger. Anyway, that's what Andrew's wearing today. I've got my standard jean jacket on with a black hoodie. So for those of you that aren't watching online, now you have an idea of what we all look like in-house.
Your life is complete. Your day is fulfilled. Yeah.
It looks good. So anyway, welcome to questions you never thought you could ask in church. We got Pastor David Gadini here, Andrew Metcalf,
And Steve Wells.
who is our director of tech and
Yeah.
many other things at our church, because at our church we do lots of things.
Good answer.
You guys both looked at me like, what are you talking about?
Like, where are you going? with
I don't
this?
know. I just talk sometimes,
Steve is on a roll.
If it's on the teleprompter,
I've had-
he'll read it.
Okay, so I had a lot of coffee. So back to the kicking and screaming. Will Ferrell brings along this whole coffee espresso machine with him to the sidelines of the soccer field because he's all hopped up on caffeine the whole time. I'm hopped up on caffeine right now because Chris, who is one of our keyboard players at church, brought me in this blueberry coffee, 2 bags of it. And so thank you, Chris, because usually she listens to the show. Thank you so much, because this is so good. And we've kind of
Intravenously. I just see at home like a tube of this stuff.
really how it is.
Eating it.
I start the timer, the tube runs up the stairs and into my bedroom, and then just starts the pump.
Right. 30 minutes before the alarm goes off.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So I wake up and I just jump.
Go.
Coffee dialysis.
It is. It's good. It's good stuff. So anyway, thank you, Chris, for the kind gift and the thoughtfulness behind it, because she knows that I love it. Because we don't have blueberry coffee at church right now. It's not in season, evidently. Melinda is
The blueberry beans they're not ripe
not
in
growing,
January,
I guess. Yeah,
February.
Yeah. So now it's the sinful beans, because we have Sinful Delight, which is delicious.
So
It is good. So Melinda is great. We have great church.
we do have great
Come,
church.
Come sometime.
Thumbs up.
Yeah.
Especially for the coffee.
Yeah.
And for
Anyway,
Steve,
let's
and for
move on.
Andrew.
Let's answer some questions and I guess talk about what the show's really about.
All right, so here's the spirit, guys. This is the podcast where we invite you to text in whatever questions you might have on God, whatever questions you might have on Christianity, on Jesus, on spirituality, on the church, on how it intersects with your life. We believe asking questions is good and is a sign of God working in your life. And I've met way too many people over the course of my ministry. I know Steve and Andrew, you've been in this exact same place, where people think that asking questions is something that they're forbidden to do, or that they shouldn't do, or that they're going to be judged by doing, or made fun of for doing, or that the question is stupid, or that no one's ever thought something like that before, or that it's so self-evident to everyone else that, oh my gosh, how could I be so dumb with a question like this? Guys, we just encourage you to erase all of that stuff. Just rewire here for a minute. If you have questions about God, that's a good thing, but ask them. And if you don't know where to ask them, this is a podcast where we invite you to text them in, and we'll try to help navigate you as best as we can. And here's how you do it. Text to 815-314-0363. Again, that's 815-314-0363, whatever your question might be. If you're live streaming with us on 216 The Net, you can post whatever questions you have right there at Facebook. Likewise, if you're joining us through Fellowship of Faith's Facebook page, you can do the same thing right there. We'll get them any different way that you send them. And we always have an inbox of questions that we don't get to every week. Andrew, I'm looking at just a quick list right here, right now. I know we got a few that have piled up on us. So
yeah, I want
let's
to start
hit
with one that jumps off of our conversation last week about when Jesus was born, how our BC AD time systems work. And someone has a clarifying question here from last week. It says, you're saying 4 BC, but earlier you said 4 to 6 AD. Can you summarize a little bit of what that's talking about and then answer that?
Yeah, so shortly before Christmas, back in December, we were doing a lot of Christmas questions that people had, both stories out of the Bible of the actual Christmas event, but also as it's been practiced in the church and the season, the holiday and stuff like that. And I made the point that most people think today that Jesus was born sometime between 4 and 6 BC. And the reason for that is because Herod the Great, who was the king of Judea during the time of Jesus' birth, died in 4 BC. And I may have misspoken at one point and said 4 AD about Jesus' birth. And again, I'd have to go back and listen to a recording. And if I said that, then no, that was a mistake. Thank you for catching it. Jesus was probably born 4 to 6 BC. Yes, Jesus was born 4 years before Christ. I know what it means. And it's just due to calendar anomalies over the years as things have gotten kind of messed up and readjusted. But I also did mention that between 6 to 9 AD, the governor Quirinius, mentioned in Luke chapter 2, was known to be the governor in the Syrian region, which would have overseen Palestine at the time. So I don't know what the question is getting at, but it may have also been touching on how was Jesus born in 4 BC if Quirinius wasn't the governor for up to 10 years later.
Yeah.
And I know we unpacked a lot of that on the previous podcast. I won't rehearse it all again today, but I'd encourage you to go back and listen to maybe one of the one or two right before Christmas, and it'll be embedded there. Certainly check us out on Spotify, whatever your podcast provider might be. We post the questions in the description, so it should be fairly easy to find. But if you're struggling on that, you can always text them again as well. But hopefully that clarifies it. And if I did misspeak, sorry.
Shame on you. Oh,
Sorry
my.
about that. Well, Steve is our resident historian, so do you have any comment on that?
No. I think he's got it covered.
He handled it adequately today. So I'm sitting here today, and the vantage point that I have here in the studio is I am looking at the creepiest 19th century Victorian doll that the world has ever produced. This thing is like 3 foot tall, and it is like seriously straight out of like a horror movie. What is this, Ken? What am I looking at? And
that's Glenda, and
okay.
Glenda, we inherited Glenda through Pete Galt's estate. So this was he left Glenda to the studio because he knew I thought it was extremely creepy, and most people who come in also very, very creepy.
Pete was right. I'm literally waiting for its head to spin
around
or wink at you or something. There's a weird, yeah, she's beautiful. Glenda,
but
thank
the
you.
dress is like the detail in this
It's
thing is
amazing, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
By the way, kind of on that note, I haven't told you guys this yet, but want to give a little plug for an upcoming episode. On February 9th, we are going to have an exorcist with us here in the studio. And so we encourage you at that point.
Performing an exorcist?
Well, if Glenda is still here, maybe.
Okay.
Maybe, but no. One who has been heavily involved in this kind of ministry for a long time. We get a lot of questions on this show about the unseen realm, the occult, the afterlife, and more specifically with ghosts and demons and demon possessions and things like that. And certainly we see that theme throughout the Bible. So if you have questions on that, make sure to check us out February 9th, and I think it'll be a good time.
Finally, I'll be able to get rid of that burning in my gut.
That's just all the coffee that you're taking.
Yes.
Through your
That's
veins.
not a demon?
No, I think it's just an ulcer.
Okay. You got something to say?
I just think that's awesome.
Okay.
Kent is happy.
All right.
Because Kent has to live with Glenda
Right,
here in the
that's-
studio.
I'm like, yes.
He
She's
just
definitely
kind of
moved from last week.
he just
so.
kind of walks in. Hey, Glenda, I'm gonna sit over here.
Oddly enough, I do say hi, Glenda, when
Hey,
I come in.
how are you?
I hope you're still standing in that chair.
That's great. Well, let's jump into some controversial territory, shall
All
we?
right. Because why not?
See if we can get banned. Yeah. This question is about COVID.
All right.
Hidden prime topics. But do you guys have the COVID vaccine? Why or why not?
Oh, great question. I actually don't have the COVID vaccine, and Fellowship of Faith doesn't have the COVID vaccine either. The DEA actually regulates this stuff pretty strictly, as it should with really any medication or drug. And so we don't store it or dispense it. There are a number of good places that you can get the COVID vaccine, though, if you want. And a quick Google search will help you find that. No problem whatsoever.
Google it.
We don't provide those at 216 the net.
Yeah, are you providing COVID vaccines?
We do
here at
not have the
21.6 the Net?
vaccine here at 21.6
No,
Net
okay.
either.
Okay, so yeah, don't come to 21.6
Yeah.
the net looking for the
We
vaccine
do have
either.
Glenda,
But
though.
Glenda
plenty of
might give it
places.
to you.
Glenda will give you something.
She might. Yeah, we'll stop there.
I don't know if that was necessarily the spirit of the question, but you did answer it. So
All right, what else we got?
let's get back to the Bible, I guess. Why did the serpent target Eve over Adam?
Why did the serpent target Eve over Adam? Great question, and I don't have a good answer for you.
We're
maybe
full of
it's a running
great
theme here today.
questions you never thought you could ask in church, and we also might not answer.
Yeah. The question is picking up on the story in Genesis 3, where it says that the serpent who was in the Garden of Eden that God had created was more crafty than any of the animals God has made. And he comes and allures or tempts Adam and Eve into defying God, rebelling against God, choosing their own way. And he seems to target Eve. But I would say that it is actually a bit of a overreach to say that, because if you read the passage closely, it actually says that Adam was there with her. And so Adam is not free of culpability in this whatsoever. In fact, a lot of theologians have actually made gotten a lot of mileage out of arguing that Adam was also sinning or failing in his role to protect Eve or to stand forward against this and letting it passively take its way and leaving Eve to her own devices. So why you see the serpent targeting Eve specifically in that specific way, you can speculate till the end of time, but it doesn't really say. The reality is they were both there. It wasn't one over the other, even though pop culture tends to think of it that way. More interestingly, though, is the biblical thing. Because when it talks about original sin, it never talks about the old Eve. It talks about us having the old Adam. And so the biblical witness actually seems to put the onus and responsibility on Adam more than Eve, with rare exceptions like 1 Timothy or 1 Timothy 2 and things. So I mean, there's enough guilt to go around here, and both shared it. But don't polarize them against each other. They're both culpable. Yeah, great question.
Cool. Any follow-up, Steve?
I could, but it'd probably get me banned from the show, and then I wouldn't be welcome in my home. My wife would throw me out, probably.
And probably rightfully so.
Probably.
Yeah.
I always throw it back in her face.
Probably with just cause.
That happened because you sinned first. So that's what I always tell her.
Yeah.
But of course,
yeah,
it's denying my own sin to begin with. So anyway,
safe to steer.
Awkward moments in the Wells household.
Just steer away from it.
There's a lot of those.
You sinned first. Shut up.
Yeah. Got a bad.
So we're talking about Galatians at our church on Sunday mornings and Wednesday nights, and basically all the time.
Yeah. For the next 10 weeks, I think, up till Easter.
Cool. So this question is dealing with Galatians. If Galatians had a sequel and you had to write it, what would you call it?
Easy. Galatians 2, Electric Boogaloo.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Right there. Done.
By the way,
Shouldn't it be Second Galatians though? Because we have 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians.
That's not what I would call it, Andrew.
Okay.
Galatians 2, Electric Boogaloo.
I think that's, You need to start coming up with like some imagery for that.
Yeah. Can you work up the mock-ups on that? Get us the
disco is implied, probably some neon.
No, okay. So
I feel
Andrew,
like
you
that
did.
falls into that category.
You're proving yourself young here. Do you know what that's in? You never
It's
saw the
some
breaking
movie.
movies, did you? Breaking
No.
in the '80s. Remember the breakdance craze? Of course,
Breakdancing.
firsthand.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you envision?
I
the
can
breakdance
envision
craze?
breakdancing.
Okay.
Followed up
Yes.
by BMX.
So one of the worst
Rad.
movies that
I
ever
think
came
Steve
out.
would do
Yeah,
well at
Rad.
Rad.
You
Yeah.
have to wax
Beat
your
Street.
head, get the spin going.
I love those movies.
Quicksilver. That was that other biking movie
Yep.
at the time.
Yep.
Yeah. So this movie came out called Breaking, not Breaking, because that would be
Breakin'.
ridiculous. But Breaking with an apostrophe.
Breaking. Okay.
You know, in
Apostrophe
place of the
N.
G. And it was a breakdance movie. And I mean, when you were 12, it was the best movie you ever saw. But I mean, you go back and watch it now, and it's just like
It's
you know,
even better.
your brain just melts out.
It's horrible.
You know, but was so critically acclaimed that the sequel was Breaking 2, Electric Boogaloo. And I got to tell you, that cast would have been offended of your disco comment. All right,
Wow.
yeah.
Really?
Barbie's offended by your disco comment because that's Barbie's favorite genre.
She was a go-go girl or something like that, wasn't
her
she? Or her
mom
mom
was
was,
a
yeah,
go-go
yeah,
dancer.
go-go dancer. That's right. Which that's a whole episode in its own right.
It really
sometime.
is. We should have her on sometime.
Yeah,
In full dress.
with the Exorcist.
Yeah.
Wait,
Yeah.
her or her mom?
Her mom.
Okay.
Not Barbie.
'Cause
Barbie loves
I think we
disco.
should have Barbie on when you're not here,
Yeah.
so we can get the inside
She'll
scoop.
Yeah,
tell
we
ya.
really should.
She'll
Yeah,
tell you the
Yeah.
dirt. Maybe.
yeah. Thumbs up on that comment if you want Barbie Wells to come and sub for
Mhm.
Steven.
I've asked her. I've asked her to.
I think
She's
would
busy
do it.
working. She works for a living.
Yeah,
She has a job.
She just doesn't sit here and make crap up all day.
Just gabbing about the church.
Yeah.
So I'm interested. I don't know. I want to dig into this Galatians questions more because something I've been learning as we've been going through this is there's so many correlations to the church at that time that Paul was writing to and the church today.
Oh
Seems
my
like
gosh,
so many
yeah.
of the same issues. So I
Yeah,
don't know that
you
we
better
need a
believe it.
sequel because it pretty well applies to us today. Like,
Oh my gosh, yeah.
and it's really once you start getting more of that historical context and delving into that the parallels are just uncanny. It's
And
crazy.
doesn't it just come to life when you start getting the backstory like that in ways that the straight read in its own right never seems to open up for you.
Yeah.
So yeah. Would we have more Galatian questions there, or you got something
No, we
stirring
don't
here?
have more Galatian questions.
Which-
I just
Okay,
wanted
but
to
it's-
say that.
Yeah.
It is cool because
Yeah.
it's like, so many people say, well, the Bible was then, it's old, it's not even relevant today. And it's like, it's totally relevant today. And of course, God is a God of all time. So why would he have something of his word that wasn't going to be relevant to any time?
Exactly.
So that's what I find fascinating. By the way, on another note, your message, and this is, I'm not going to say this to Dave because then his head will get as big as his room, but the message was great on Sunday. Like probably one of my top 3 messages.
Wow.
And I've heard a lot of messages. Well, I heard a lot of bad ones too.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've been a part
Any
of a
us
lot
who
of
have
bad ones.
I've been a part of a lot of bad ones. I've given a lot of bad ones.
But it was great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So kudos to you and
thanks, man.
and working
Thank you.
working that out with God and the Holy Spirit. And
Yeah, and and
It's
maybe
great.
too, just if you'd
go
like
back
to
and
hear,
watch it on FOF Plus.
yeah, go to fellowshipoffaith.org. We serve a church called Fellowship of Faith here in McHenry, Illinois. We've got a huge listening audience that's actually national and global. So I mean, a lot of people connect with our church that never step foot on our campus. You can always come in person, but if not, check us out on recording, check us out live stream, check us out online. Go to fellowshipoffaith.org, go to the FOF Plus page, and you'll find the archive of past messages, past podcasts, and everything else right there, resources to hopefully help you in your faith.
Yeah. Let's go to the comments real quick because speaking of globally, we've got Andrew Kiza, who's
From Uganda.
from
right?
Uganda.
All right.
Yep. He
All
joins
right.
us.
Welcome, Andrew. Glad
He
to have you
joins
with us again.
every Sunday as well.
Yeah.
So he's
fantastic.
online with us. So love you, brother, and can't wait to see you soon. Eddie Martinez, I heard Exorcist. Oh, he waves his hand early at the beginning of the show. Have any of you been involved in an exorcism? What preparation is needed to take on such difficult task?
Great question. Thanks for asking. Yes, I have been involved in them before. The person that we'll have on the show has been involved in it far more to a degree than I ever have. And, he'll be able to share a lot more insight than I can right now. I think the mistake a lot of people think with this type of thing is that there's some kind of like magic words that you've got to learn, some kind of incantation or spell or like form or ritual that you have to go through. And that's really not the case. I'm going to steal the thunder of the guy who's going to come on. The people who get into this ministry often find themselves in it by happenstance, not by preparation, training, or intentional seeking it out. And the people who start finding themselves into it start noticing that it starts snowballing, and that it is a far more prevalent issue than a lot of people realize, both globally, but even just locally in the world today. And, you know, and this brother will tell you, he's like, man, half the time I don't know what I'm doing. You just be bold in the name of Jesus. And so, you know, the preparation that really takes place it's the preparation of character and of the heart that needs to be taking place as a lifestyle rather than in the moment. So what I find is that the devil likes to prey on our spiritual weaknesses, our character weaknesses, the flaws and the essence of who we are, our integrity, and our righteousness, if you can put it with that kind of biblical term. And those secrets that we hold, those unresolved issues that we carry, those doubts that we have, those defiances we have against God, those are the things the devil loves to manipulate in our life. And it's so important in this kind of work, if you will, to be taking assessment of your own house and making sure that you're getting right with God on those things. Jesus will talk very abundantly about the importance of fasting and prayer is a part of this as well, and we can flush that out in the future. But yeah, it's a great question. I know there's so much interest and curiosity on this, so thanks for asking, and hopefully that whets the appetite a little bit. But February 9th, I'll plug that one more time, and yeah, a whole show that we'll dedicate to this.
Great.
I'm excited for that.
Yeah.
This one is a rather long question.
Okay.
It's a little bit of a novel with a few questions in it.
Okay.
So,
okay. Let's have it.
yeah, I'm just going to jump in. First, let me preempt this by saying I know we are not perfect. We are sinful. I know God is perfect and without sin. I'm not discounting that fact and the implications of that fact. That being said, I have a question. Why the constant dirge of "we are not worthy"? And that's in quotes.
Yeah.
I look to the father analogy. I've never once said to my kids, "You are not worthy of my grace and love because you fail." Not once. Yet in the church, it feels like this is what God is telling us. Or maybe I have that wrong and it's the opposite.
Mhm.
I've never thought my kids thought they were unworthy of my love and kindness. If they did, I would love on them like no other and tell them to please change that mindset. I would try to coach them out of that mindset as it is more destructive than building. If we have a loving God and he loves us unconditionally, then why all the self-loathing wording?
Fantastic question. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for asking this. And you're not alone in this sense. Now, there are literally 350 to 400,000 churches in the United States alone. And I'm not even talking globally yet. And I bring that up because what that means is we should expect there to be a wide divergence of approach to this kind of issue. And so depending on the church you are in, you might get a different reason, good or bad, right or wrong, as to why they're doing it. There are way too many churches that I think obsess in a self-loathing, self-hatred kind of idea. Where I'm going to anchor this question instead is into a common practice you'll see in most Christian churches called confession. This can come across in a number of different ways. Churches that have a liturgical root or a historic basis will often do it through a fixed prayer of some kind. I'll say one that's common in Lutheran circles with which we affiliate, but certainly there's a universality of it to Anglican and Catholic and Reformed movements and other things as well. And it goes something like this. Most merciful God, we confess that we are by nature sinful and unclean. We have sinned against you in thought, word, and deed, by what we have done and by what we have left undone. We have not loved you with our whole heart. We have not loved our neighbor as ourselves. We justly deserve your present and eternal punishment. But for the sake of your Son, Jesus Christ, have mercy on us. Forgive us, renew us, and lead us so that we may delight in your will and walk in your ways to the glory of your holy name. Now, you might find variation on that, but I think that captures the core of the historic way.
It was hard not to join you in that.
Yeah.
I know. Those of us who have grown up with it, you know it by heart, right?
Amen.
And the difficulty is actually getting your mind off autopilot to make it a sincere
Right.
prayer or confession, as opposed to just mouthing the words. But it's not restricted there, because there's a lot of churches that will do things like a come to Jesus moment, call you to Jesus, or an altar call would be something like that popular 19th and 20th century language,
Mhm.
where maybe it's not done through a formal prayer, but it's done through a spiritual leader, a charismatic teacher, a pastor, something like that, calling people to repent with very similar sentiments and language, even if it isn't all people saying something together. The intent is the same, but I think what the listener is, the question asker is intimating here, is there seems to be within this sometimes maybe a sense of, we're not worthy. And I can't not think like Wayne's World when I hear that line, we're not worthy, we're not worthy. And I think maybe you're misconstruing the point of what these prayers are about. Now, I won't claim to speak for all churches. Some churches truly are heavy-handed. Some churches, unfortunately, are mired in self-hatred and self-loathing, and I don't think that that's biblical or theologically correct. But I'll speak for Fellowship of Faith and why we do that confession, if you will. Actually, as I think about it and look about it, I don't see self-loathing in it at all. I just see a reality statement being made. Merciful God, I'm confessing or acknowledging that you're merciful. In my nature, I'm sinful and unclean, which are kind of synonymous terms in the Bible, which I think is actually true. And I think biblically, there's a place where we are not to come to realize that we're such good people, but that we're broken people, that we're defiled people, vandalized people, that we are sinful not just by what we do, but that we are corrupt of our very being and less than who we are supposed to be as image bearers of God. So it's just a statement claiming that. Now, whatever emotional quotient you attach to that is maybe another matter, but I do think that the reality statement holds. Yeah, I'm sinful and unclean. And in what ways? Well, I've sinned against you in what I've thought and what I've done and what I've said and what I've done. I've sinned against you in thought, word, and deed, both by what I've done and by what I've left undone. I haven't loved you with my whole heart. I haven't loved my neighbor as ourselves. I think all of those are truth statements. The question is, why is it emotionally sparking a deep sense of self-loathing, as opposed to just a reality assessment of yourself? And there could be any number of reasons for that. For some that I've met, because there is self-loathing, because as they've looked at their lives and they've looked at their sin, they hate what it's done to them, and they hate what it's done through them to other people. And in the course of my ministry, I've gotten to meet many very broken people. I've been in places of my own life where I've been very broken myself, and no one had to tell me this statement or convince me it was true. I knew it to the depth of my core. And for me, it was some of the most cathartic words I ever said, because I got to air it out. And I got to air it out with a God who is merciful, and that I'm affirming is merciful and asking for his mercy, even though I knew I deserved nothing good from God, but only judgment. So that's what it's intended to do, not to mire you in constant self-hatred. It's meant to move you almost as a little narrative or a microcosm from a place of acknowledging your brokenness and sinfulness to going, but God's redeemed me, God is restoring me, God has forgiven me, and I can live boldly and joyfully in him. You need the conclusion, which is historically called absolution, which is the pronouncement of forgiveness, and it's meant to be a pronouncement of triumph and victory. I know it often doesn't come across that way in your local church, but that's the intention behind it. And so I think if you keep it in proper perspective with that, it can be a powerful way to kind of release and bring catharsis of the brokenness that you have, as opposed to miring you down, I think is the question put it. So thank you for asking and taking the time to write that, actually. But certainly thank you for suggesting it here, bringing it up here today, and hopefully this is helped steer you through it a little bit.
Yeah, and one of the similar things that I've seen and have seen a number of times is either pastors or books, contemporary Christian books. It's that the buzzword is enough. You are enough. You are enough. And I've always had an issue with that, because no, I'm not enough. Jesus is enough, and so therefore I look to him so that he can well, just as you were explaining before, with the creed or the statement of faith or the confession, we're saying those things because of the fact that we need that forgiveness. We need to come to him and air out our dirty laundry, so to speak.
Absolutely.
So that he can then continue to work within us.
And that's the basis of the Christian faith and hope, is that we cannot achieve or do it ourselves. And I don't just mean be successful in life. I mean, have a relationship with God, be the people that God has called us to be, get in right with God. Andrew, you mentioned earlier just kind of this growing interest in Galatians as our church is doing it. And at Fellowship of Faith, we're encouraging people to memorize Galatians 2:19-21. We're saying it every week, even as a prayer to help kind of build on that and keep a familiarity through repetition. But let me share the last verse of that, because I think it's actually pertinent right to this. Paul writes to this church, "I do not set aside the grace of God, for if righteousness could be gained through the law, Christ died for nothing." Meaning that everything Jesus did is worthless, and this whole Christian teaching is pointless about the centrality of his death and resurrection if it was possible or capable for us to live up to God's standard or become who he calls us to be on our own. You got it, Steve.
Yeah.
Right.
So I have a couple follow-ups to that last question that I was just thinking as you were talking. A couple different points. I don't know which one to go with first. We'll go with this one. How do babies sin?
How do
Because I think
babies
that's something
sin?
like, if we're going through confession, we're like, okay, yes, I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this. We're sinful people, all these things. But then you're like, do babies need to confess and be forgiven? Like, well, they cried. I don't know. Like,
do babies need to confess? No. Do they need to be forgiven? Absolutely. How do babies sin? There's so many kind of like little short ways I want to answer this. Like, I got 1,000 right now. And I'm just going to give you a couple. First, have you ever met a baby? Look, I tell you, for every baby I met, they are the most self-centered, selfish creatures that you will ever meet.
Me. Feed me, change me, love me, hug me.
you're talking about your own life right now.
I know.
Yeah. Yes.
This is what I tell the Barbie all the time.
Every day.
Feed me, burp me, change me.
And it's your fault because you're the original sinner, right?
I am.
This is the burden you have to bear now.
Yeah, sorry.
But putting that aside just for a moment, because we can laugh about it at that way, I think it's a misunderstanding. Babies are sinners, regardless if they sin. Because you sin because you're a sinner. You're not a sinner because you sin. All of us are born with an inherent corruption of soul and character. And this is what theologians will call original sin. It's something inherent, not just what we do, but who we are. So that we're getting more than infractions against God forgiven. We're actually getting renewal and restoration of our broken selves as well. This is why Jesus will talk about being born again, is that our old self needs to die, to keep pushing the metaphor, if you will, and then a rebirth that happens to him into the new person, if you will, that we are meant to be by God's design. So no, babies are sinners. They are corrupt. They are not perfect creatures. Even though when we have our children, we love them so unconditionally, and we love them with an undying love. Well, what a beautiful image of how God thinks of us in the exact same state. These corrupt, selfish, self-centered, insufficient, impulsive creatures, completely dependent on him for our sustenance and grace, right?
Just like, I think another way that you could to sum up, I think what you're saying is your sinful deeds do not make you sinful. You're already sinful, just as if your good deeds are not making you holy, So it's like, okay, well, it's not about what I do, it's about who I am, right? And what God is trying to make out of me. He's trying to make, he's every day, imitating Christ. He's trying to make us holy. like him.
Exactly. And it's why I like the word restore, because in the biblical narrative, God designed and created us to be something that we no longer are because of the defilement of sin, with that whole serpent question we had earlier in Adam and Eve, and the inheritance of it coming down to us, and the corruption in the human psyche and what have you. But it's like God is on a rescue project of going, I'm not just trying to take something that exists and make it better. I'm actually trying to take someone who is fallen and restore them to their rightful place and call, which is what we seek in Christ.
So it's kind of existential off of that. But so God created us in his image as perfect humans, if you will, with Adam. There was no sin in the world. We were creating that image. So what changed to make our nature sinful then? If we were created as this perfect being without this nature, then all of a sudden we just had the ability to embed that into ourselves for the rest of eternity.
So
like that seems a little, I don't know. Okay, we're created in this perfect image, and then we messed up once, and now all of a sudden all of us are by default evil. It seems extreme. I don't know.
I'm
'Cause
following
that's
you
like
completely,
that's
Andrew.
what's
Yeah.
preached.
Yeah.
It's like, you can't do anything good. You're bad, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad. But thankfully God is merciful and has mercy on us. But like, he allowed this to happen. Does that make sense?
Great question. And, and unfortunately, I think what you just stated gets preached too often that way. Certainly I've been guilty of it, because it's kind of a shorthand summary, but the shorthand summary leaves a lot of unanswered questions and a lot of points of what almost seems like injustice, if you will, before God. Like, wait a minute, this one little thing and we've doomed the entire cosmos, not to mention humanity. It's not the way I would put it in a more fuller expression. Perfection, I don't think, implies by any means absence of choice. So the capacity, certainly for Adam and Eve, for the first humans, and you can argue by God's design, is that we were always free, able to freely choose and love God, or freely turn from him, right? The love was not compelled, coerced, or forced. God wanted a relationship with people that was based in, dare I say, dignity, mutual respect, and freedom of will, if you will, not out of fear or coercion or being programmed that way, or on and on, if you will. But let me maybe give an analogy, and then maybe another point of correction. Think about it like a computer virus. One little piece of code gets in, but it corrupts the whole system. And it doesn't mean the entire system is completely corrupt. It doesn't mean the entire system is completely evil, but it means nothing is quite working right anymore. Nothing will be fully able to function the way it will. And now imagine it's some kind of like Trojan virus, which continues to grow. Because what you see in the early chapters of Genesis is that it wasn't just one choice, but that the bad choice of Adam and Eve, while ushering this into the world, was compounded upon endlessly. And humanity went down into a spiral, if you will, against God's desire, to where by Genesis 6, God is going, every inclination of their heart is now evil. They just keep choosing this way of their own volition, but also at the compelling nature, if you will, of the virus. That's why theologians will say this today, that while we like to talk about freedom of the will, it isn't really the most accurate way to describe a human being today. Adam and Eve, absolutely. The newly created person, yes. But those who are under the power of sin aren't really completely free. Any bit more than an addict is completely free. They can still make choice, and yet they are driven and controlled by a greater force, if you will. So there's kind of a both and there.
Yeah.
I also like to steer away from the word perfect. That when God created everything, he made it perfect. I've certainly been guilty of talking that way and using that language, but sometimes that can imply something that isn't intended either. To be very specific to Genesis 1, it says that God made it very good. But you get in the idea of Genesis 1 that what God started, humanity was meant to build on. That's why one of the key load-bearing passages of the Old Testament is actually Genesis 1:26, where it said, God created them in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. And he said to them, fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over every creature that rules along, that moves along the ground and swims in the sea. And he places humanity to be the presence of God and his vice rulers, if I can put it that way, in his stead, which I think is important because so many times today people go, God, why don't you just fix it all? Why don't you just, solve this? Why don't you just make it perfect so I can just lay in a green meadow, I guess, and have angels feed me grapes and, and just live the life of luxury.
Like my life at home.
Like Steve's life at home, in between the whining and the burping and the,
Right.
But all the while, God is going, I literally created you for this purpose. You develop it. You build on the good that I've done. You make it better. This is humanity's purpose at its most basic level and what it means to be an image bearer of God. And so perfect assumes to me that it's a static state. It's all just right. Don't tamper with it. Don't touch it. Don't move it. Because it's like this almost fragile thing. When God's like, no, this is very good. Now take it further. Now, no moral corruption was there. No sin was there. No curse upon humanity was present. But it doesn't mean it was at the fullest state of what God intended it to be. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me. So I'm going through this study right now of Galatians.
Excuse me.
And it's different than the one we're doing at church as well.
Mhm.
But so I'm doing both of them.
And give a plug for it because you've been speaking. Kyle.
Kyle Idleman.
Kyle
it's on
Idleman, yeah.
Right Now Media, and that's something
Yeah,
we'll
six
talk about
session study,
later.
yeah.
But 6-session study, and he's talking about the Judaizers.
Mhm.
So familiar with this, and where Old Testament, right? So they're used to following the law. And to me, they were almost more happy with following the law because it was their gauge of how they were doing.
You can measure
right?
it.
There is measurement there.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they really had a problem with, the death and resurrection of Christ, because it's like, what do you mean we're not following the law anymore? But that's how I want to gauge how I'm doing.
And that's how I connect with God, and that's how I define myself.
Right.
And yeah.
But yet at the same time, following the law is not God's image. It's, these were the rules, so you needed to abide by those. And so I often think today, even where I don't know if I should go here or not, but I will, where we have certain laws in place, and a lot of people love those laws because therefore they can somewhat, quote unquote, gauge as to how they're doing in society today.
Mhm.
And it's like, well, then where's your freedom? Are you truly free, or do you want to be living under the law at this point?
And what's fascinating is that's
society.
the entire argument that Galatians makes in chapter 4, 5, and 6. And it's on slavery and freedom terminology. Another way that he puts the law, that Paul puts the law in Galatians 4, is he talks about it as a tutor. And he makes the analogy to a young kid who's going to inherit his father's estate. Well, before he comes of age, he has to be groomed, taught, brought up, and oftentimes by slaves in the ancient world who would serve as those tutors.
Mhm.
But there was an endpoint. There was a terminus, if you will, because it was meant to get you ready where you no longer needed the rules, because your character was so shaped and formed to be in tune with, well, Paul would say, the way of God and the Spirit, that there's no need for the law
Right.
anymore. It served its purpose. Why are you running back to weak and miserable principles instead of the freedom that you have in Christ, conform to his will?
Right. And okay, so that kind of leads into this. So a lot of people that I talk to, I don't like religion. Okay, well, I don't really either. I don't like religion and after going through this study, something came to mind, which is America gave us freedom of religion, right? Christ actually gives us freedom from religion,
Mhm.
which is great because it's not like Christ is not a religion. Christ is our savior. He's our God. It's not something that, with all the different religions that are out there, it's like, well, fine, whatever, go do what you're going to do, but it's not truth, So anyway,
Yeah.
Great study. I would highly recommend going through it right now.
Yeah, I got to flag myself,
Yeah.
and I'm looking forward to it too. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
So someone commented on Facebook here asking, are principles and laws the same? I think in regards to that conversation we're having of you can follow the rules, but maybe your principles are still off, or you can mess up your principles, I don't
It
differentiate.
depends in the context in which you're asking the question. Thank you for this. And it can't be answered simply because it depends who's talking and what their context is. So when you read Galatians, for example, and Paul refers to the law, he is undoubtedly referring to what is called the Mosaic law or the Sinai covenant, which is basically all the rules, regulations, and commands that you'll find between Exodus chapter 19 and the book of Numbers, maybe 7, 8, or 9, along with Deuteronomy thrown in there. That code, if you will, that defined the covenant relationship between Israel and God. That would be different than a principle. Certainly they can be congruent, but they are not one in the same. However, in a different context, someone might be talking about laws like we talk about laws of the universe, like the basic principles of how life works. And then, of course, that person's using it synonymously. So you have to check it against the greater context of who's talking or what you're reading.
Yeah. Let's go to Gene's question real quick on the Facebook comments. It's if a Christian finds himself in a church that is not accepting of the whole truth, should he or she stay and try to get the church to repent and come back to the Bible, or leave and look for another church?
And Gene, hopefully you're not talking about our church at Fellowship of Faith, but if you are, point it out, brother, because every church is sinful. Every single church is corrupt because anything that humans touch is fundamentally corrupt. And I think a mistake that many people make today is they're looking for purity, like absolute purity in an institution or organization or a church. And I think all of us yearn for this because all of us sense innately the destructive power of sin and the brokenness of sin and how God has made us to be something different. So the yearning is great. But I think the mistake a lot of people make is as soon as they come across any level of sin or corruption in anything, they jettison it, whether it's a spouse, whether it's a friend, whether it's a church, whether it's a government, whether it's an organization. I don't want this to be misheard. Because what I'm not suggesting is that you just turn a blind eye and you say it's okay. No, all of us are constantly called by God to examine ourselves, to evaluate ourselves, and to confess our sins. Hence, back to the confession question, why it's a regular practice in church. So, Gene, I would say expect that at some level, your church is still learning, growing, because at some level it's mistaken, wrong, not practicing things the best way, the right way, the most God-honoring way, and figuring that out together. The question I would simply ask for the church you belong to is, are they open to looking at it, to admitting it, to confessing it, to working on the issues, to thinking through conflicting ideas of truth critically, as opposed to just one person's version of the truth, and let that be more of the gauge. I've known some people that have been called to be prophets in corrupt organizations and have felt very called to be a voice trying to turn the tide. I have met other people who have likewise been called to say, I need to distance myself from this for whatever reason. And I think there's merit and value to both, depending on the situation and the character and nature of who you happen to be as well. But great question. I thank you for asking it.
Yeah. And Gene, I can probably give you this personally. Like this was something that I have been through, to where started out, well, what's a healthy church, right? I mean, there's, how do you put that on a scale? I think you can look for healthy things in a church, but I think with all churches, like you're saying, there's some brokenness inside and some sin and whatnot. But that's the trap that I kind of got into, where I saw some things that were not right within the church and called those things out and took it to the point to where as high as I could go within the church elders or the church leadership and even outside the church in different avenues as well. And at some point I had to recognize, am I here to prove a point, or am I here to serve Christ? And so that was kind of the realization that it was like, you know what? at this point in time, I'm in such a valley right now that it was more about me trying to expose when God already knows, so it's like, what are you doing? Who are you trying to prove this to? Would I like to be outed? Absolutely. Yeah. I don't think that's healthy in any type of relationship where you're thinking that Christ is how do I explain this? I don't need to explain it.
No, I think we're following
being,
you.
Point being is
Yeah.
that sometimes I think, you know what, challenge those things and try and gently correct those things and take it as far as you can. But at some point, you have to say that it's not about you; it's about where God wants you to be, and He will shine light on it in His time. He'll take care of it. He's in control, and that's what you really have to remember. So.
Yeah, great question.
Yeah, we had one get texted in here. This is for all three of us, so
Wow.
no longer just asking Dave questions. In all
What
of
about
your
Ken?
And your day is made right now.
Is it?
And-
Is it?
Oh,
for-
yeah.
Can Kent answers this too? I don't want to leave him out.
I guess I will allow it.
He looks sad over
This is
there.
for all four of you then.
The listener's like, that's not what I asked.
Yeah.
Shut it down. In all of your years of ministry, what view or perspective that you had when you started has changed the most, and in what way?
Great question.
Mm,
Wow, that demands a little bit of
processing.
processing there. Yeah.
I think for me, one of the things is kind of what we were just talking about is the idea that, like you said, no church is 100% correct or right or perfect.
Pure.
Yeah. And that's something that I've had to wrestle with I feel like I'm always on this search for what is the truth, the 100% right. This is what God said. This is what He meant. And I don't think we're ever going to find that on this earth, because that's the tension of faith and of us being human and not being God. If we 100% knew everything, that would make me God. So that there's this disparity between that of we're on this constant search for it, but part of having faith is living in that tension of not knowing it fully, if that makes sense. Clearly I'm still in the process of this because I don't know how to espouse it, but
I had a seminary professor who actually baptized my wife, who writes and teaches extensively in Christian philosophy, apologetics, the intersection between culture and faith. And he's got a great line, just a little tag that's reminding me of. He goes, there is such a thing as absolute truth, but none of us will know it absolutely. Certainly the side of eternity.
Yeah.
And that isn't to deny that what we know is to say that what we know is false, that God does reveal Himself, but we see in part. And we know in part right now. And so we can know, but we will not know absolutely, certainly this side of eternity.
Can you read that question again?
Yeah. In your years of ministry, what view or perspective that you had when you started has changed the most?
Yeah.
In what way?
I think one thing that comes to mind is, when I was first, I don't want to, depends on who you're coming from. Some churches say it's a call with a capital C, or you're called, or whatever. You can use whatever language you want to use. It doesn't matter to me. I know where God wants me at this point. And I think when I first started in ministry, to me, it was about, your gift set that God has given you really lends to you doing this. And so we want you to come in and do this. And so you get this idea in your mind that, this is kind of new to me, but at the same time, obviously, this is what I should be doing. And you have a very narrow view of what your servanthood looks like, within the church. And I think over the years that I've been doing this is that if you step back and realize that God will use you, you're not going to use God, right? As far as what gifts He's given you and what your abilities are and your strengths and stuff.
You're the tool. God isn't the tool.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so I think over my years of, thankfully, that I've come to the realization now, and I'll continue to learn as I go, of course, but it's not to try and control everything, to really step back and have a bigger picture of things. And that's one thing that I love to do, is just step back and look at the big picture of things, and versus just really narrowing a narrow field of vision to say, well, this is what I got to do, because these are where my strengths and gifts are at. So therefore, it's just, I don't know, it's so much more freeing, I guess, now in the years that I'm doing ministry right now versus, 16 years ago, so maybe just a little perspective there. But that's growth, I think.
Mhm.
I think that's with anything in life,
Yeah.
a little wisdom.
Mine is a little simplistic sounding, and it's almost like embarrassing to say out loud, because you're like, really? There's been a number of perspectives that have changed over ministry that I can get into, but I think the one that was maybe the most shocking and the most difficult to adapt to, but the most enlightening, if you will, as well, just kind of realizing everyone's not like me.
Mm.
And I don't mean that as cliche as it came out, but just the way I think, the way I process, what lights me up, like early on in ministry, getting so excited about, something that can happen in a church, and laying out a vision plan and getting it all right, and thinking in my mind naively that churches didn't have this, but if we could just set it up, people were hungry for this and wanted this and would, oh my gosh, it would be like this epiphany, and jump in and go, no, that doesn't light you up. That isn't what you want. That isn't where you're at. That, and I don't even mean like on a spiritual spectrum of,
Right.
of better to worse. Just, you're just in a different place or have a different priority set. And learning to realize that people are far more complex than I thought. And the patience that comes with that, and the sensitivity that comes with that, and the humbleness that has to come with respecting the dignity of people who are wired by God in a different way than I might be, and what it means to do life together in a church, as opposed to full steam ahead down this route.
Yeah. Well, it makes me happy that you took the words that I gave you yesterday in our counseling session to heart.
And thank you for that, Steve. I mean, I know, you saw me scribbling them down, right?
It's not always about you, Dave.
Yes. Hey, get over yourself.
I just had to make it a little more verbose.
Yeah, right. We need a drama-filled music. Anyway, no, you're right though. Like just the letting go of the reins, to say, I'm not going to control this. God's in charge here. It's His will that will be done. Yeah, we'll try and see what that is, and pray about it, and really try to think like, where does God want this church to go? Or what ministry that you're in, or
yeah, and it's kind of what does this congregation need right now? It's not like, well, this is my solution,
Right.
so we're going to do this.
Right.
It's like, okay, but that might not be what the people in your church need right now. That might not be what excites them, or how it speaks to them, or they're in a completely different place.
And the difficulty of even talking them as a singular class of people.
Yeah.
Right. It's so variegated
to lump them into one group.
Yeah, this is
Right.
what our church needs. It's like,
Right.
no, it's that's what that one
This
person
segment
in your
or
church
segment
needs.
or something. Right.
Which at the same time, I think that's something really important for anybody that's within a congregation or a family of believers together, is to say, we're not all the same in here, so we have very different probably backgrounds, different likes, different and dislikes even, so really, I think, you mentioned something last week where, we had a little bit of an issue, which I thought you did a fantastic job of speaking to. And so it's empathy, realizing where different people are coming from, so that you can then approach it in a civil manner, not just throwing a tantrum about something. It's like, no, well, what situation has brought them to this point, or what situation had, like, there's not one person in the church that's there for that has had the same background or same upbringing or same circumstances. So we're all different. And that's the challenge of being in a congregation, is that we're sinful, different backgrounds, and we all have to try and
Do life together.
Yeah. That's hard,
Right.
So Kent, what's your big
Being a pastor's kid, I as a young guy, I thought I was in, right? Dad's pastor, I'm in, I'm good. But through years of ministry is understanding to walk in the light and not be the light. So
Yes.
you know, and
Yeah, I
it
like
just
that.
and it's helped me to understand better my relationship with God.
So what do you think about the children's song, "This Little Light of Mine"?
Yeah.
I'm gonna let it shine.
Well, first of all, children shouldn't be playing with fire.
Tell my daughter that she's on this fire kick with a lighter at home. So of course I had to show her where you put the
In your hand.
in the hand
Yeah.
and then go, and then she was amazed by it. I'm like, yep, I'm still cool.
And Steve's house is an ash.
Yeah.
But Barbie's in first. So there
Yes.
you go. It all comes back to
We
that.
all
now
comes back to-
we now have a hairless cat running around.
Mr. Bigglesworth.
Yeah. Anyway,
Well, we're
our time's
pushing the
about up.
clock here,
Yep.
guys. We want to thank you for listening today. Again, this is questions you never thought you could ask in church. If we did not get to your question today, it is in our inbox. We will get to it as soon as we possibly can. You can text your questions in anytime to 815-314-0363. Again, 815-314-0363. We broadcast live every Wednesday afternoon, 12:30 p.m. Central Time. But make sure to catch us on your favorite podcast provider if you've missed an episode. Just search questions you never thought you could ask in church, especially those of you who are past subscribers. When we changed over, you'll have to resubscribe if you haven't done that already to stay up to date. Check that out. So God bless you. Remember, God loves you. Jesus died for you. Jesus rose from the dead, and you can have new life in him. Hey, catch you next time.
Questions you never thought you could have.
Right.
Questions you never thought you could
Here's
have.
a
Questions you never thought you could have. Questions you never thought you could have.